Awakening to emptiness. Mira Hastings gasped as the chill of cryosleep melted away, her senses sluggish yet overwhelmed. The pod seal hissed open, releasing a sharp tang of ozone into the stagnant air. It wasn't the serene awakening she had imagined, something was wrong. The amber emergency lights flickered ominously, casting long, fractured shadows across the room. Her vision blurred, muscles weak from centuries of stasis, Mira forced herself upright. She was disoriented, but not so much that she missed the silence, the suffocating absence of the hum that should have signaled life support systems. The cryochamber was vast and dark, save for her pod, the only one illuminated. Warning, emergency revival protocol initiated, the AI's voice crackled through damaged speakers. Ship status, critical. Mira swallowed hard, her throat dry and her voice hoarse. Status report, she croaked, fighting against the weight of fear clawing at her chest. The holographic interface sputtered to life, and the AI's voice returned, cold and clinical. Ship time, 17,482 CE. Current complement, crew member Mira Hastings. Colonist count, 0. The numbers didn't make sense. Her head spun. Over 15,000 years had passed. It was supposed to be 50 years, just enough time for the ship, Odyssey, to reach its halfway point en route to Kepler, 186f. And what did the AI mean by 0 colonists? There were 3,000 people aboard when they launched. Heart pounding, Mira swung her legs over the edge of the pod, forcing her unsteady body to stand. The cryochamber stretched endlessly before her, the rows of dormant pods now empty shells. Where had everyone gone? Aegis, she whispered, addressing the ship's AI. What happened to the colonists? Cryopods were removed approximately 12,378 years ago by entities matching no known classification. No casualties detected. Entities unidentified. Mira's breath hitched. The colonists had been taken, but by whom? And why? She stumbled toward the nearest console, her legs trembling with every step. Her hands shook as she activated the terminal. The ship's logs appeared, fragmented and incomplete. The Odyssey, humanity's last hope for colonization, had suffered catastrophic drive failure a mere 7 years into its journey. Adrift and powerless, it had been left to drift in the void for millennia. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. 12,000 years ago, an unidentified force intercepted the ship. The logs showed the intruders dismantling the cryopods with precision and removing the colonists. Only Mira had been left behind, still in stasis. Her pod had been untouched. Why? She shook her head, trying to suppress the panic rising in her chest. Survival first, questions later. Aegis, she rasped, what's the condition of the ship? The holographic display shifted, revealing a 3D rendering of the Odyssey. The image sent a shiver down her spine. The sleek, 5-kilometer cylinder that had launched from Earth was now a warped and shattered wreck. Whole sections were missing, while others were wrapped in crystalline structures that pulsed faintly with an inner light. What is that? She whispered, staring at the alien crystal formations. Analysis inconclusive, Aegis replied. Substance exhibits properties of living matter combined with advanced quantum resonance. No comparable data available. Mira leaned heavily against the console, her mind racing. Humanity had sent Odyssey into the stars to find a new home, but instead, it had become the site of an alien encounter far beyond their comprehension. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. The colonists might still be alive, wherever they had been taken. And whoever, or whatever, had left the crystalline structures might hold the key to understanding what had happened. As she turned toward the ship's medical bay, Mira felt the weight of her situation settle on her shoulders. She was alone, stranded 15,000 years into the future on a dying ship, surrounded by mysteries she didn't yet understand. But she wasn't ready to give up. She had been chosen for this mission because she was a problem solver, a fighter. And if humanity's last hope was to be more than a forgotten relic, Mira knew she had to uncover the truth, no matter how impossible it seemed. Outside the viewport, the alien crystals pulsed faintly, almost as if they were alive, watching. Waiting. Mira's footsteps echoed through the empty corridors of the Odyssey, the once bustling ship now a silent tomb. Every breath she took felt heavier than the last as she made her way to the control center. The ship's artificial gravity was weaker than she remembered, making each step feel like she was wading through a dream. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the colonists been taken? Why had she been left behind? And who, or what, was responsible for the crystalline structures wrapped around the ship? The control center was a mess of flickering screens and cracked panels, a stark reminder of the ship's catastrophic failure. Mira scanned the console, her hands trembling as she activated the main terminal. The system struggled to respond, its internal damage evident in the fragmented displays. She sifted through corrupted logs, piecing together what she could. The Odyssey had launched with such hope. Humanity's last great effort to colonize another world had been filled with promise, its passengers chosen from the best and brightest. Yet, 7 years into the journey, disaster struck. The propulsion systems had failed catastrophically, leaving the ship adrift in deep space. Without power, it had been left vulnerable, tumbling aimlessly through the void. Then, the logs revealed something unexpected. Approximately 12,000 years ago, the Odyssey had been intercepted. The records were incomplete, but they painted a chilling picture. Unknown entities had boarded the ship, their presence recorded only as faint shadows in the sensor data. They had spent decades studying the vessel, dismantling systems with precision and care. Most disturbingly, they had removed every single cryopod except Mira's. She stared at the screen, her mind reeling. These beings weren't hostile, at least not in the conventional sense. They had taken the colonists without causing harm, leaving no trace of violence or destruction. But why? What could they possibly want with thousands of humans in cryosleep? Mira leaned back in her chair, her fingers brushing the neural port at the base of her skull. Her enhancements, subtle as they were, allowed her to process data faster and think more clearly. It was one of the reasons she had been chosen for the mission. Yet now, she couldn't help but wonder if those enhancements had made her a target, or spared her from whatever fate had befallen the others. As she searched for answers, a new notification appeared on the console, Access Gift Package. The words seemed out of place, almost casual in their presentation. Mira hesitated, her finger hovering over the selection. Every instinct screamed caution, but curiosity pushed her forward. She selected the option, and the terminal flooded with data. The information was overwhelming. It wasn't just the story of the Odyssey, it was the story of humanity itself. Millennia of history, advancements, and struggles unfolded before her, condensed into a single archive. Mira's breath caught as she scrolled through the files, each revelation more shocking than the last. Earth had faced an unimaginable threat, a cosmic phenomenon that rendered biological life unsustainable. Faced with extinction, humanity had made an impossible choice. They had abandoned their physical forms, transcending into beings of pure energy and information. The transformation was not instantaneous. It had taken centuries of trial and error, of sacrifice and ingenuity. But in the end, humanity had survived, not as flesh and blood, but as something entirely new. The beings who had intercepted the Odyssey were not aliens. They were humanity's descendants, so far removed from their origins that direct communication with Mira had been impossible. They had evolved into a collective consciousness, a network of energy and thought that spanned the stars. Yet, despite their advancements, they still carried traces of their past. They had left Mira behind because they needed her. She was a link to the humanity they had once been, a bridge between what they had become and the species they had left behind. Mira's hands shook as she absorbed the enormity of it all. The crystalline structures outside the ship were not signs of destruction, they were gifts, a means of communication left behind by her post-human descendants. The modifications to her neural architecture, the preserved cryopod, the archive of history, it was all part of a grander design. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a caretaker of humanity's legacy. As the terminal dimmed, Mira felt a strange mix of awe and fear. She had awakened expecting to rebuild a colony, to guide humanity's future on a distant world. Instead, she had been thrust into a role she never anticipated, the bridge between humanity's past and its unimaginable future. Somewhere, out in the vastness of space, her descendants waited for her. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but one thing was certain, she would find them. Mira stood at the observation window, her gaze fixed on the alien crystals wrapping the ship's exterior. They pulsed with an inner light, their rhythm mesmerizing and almost alive. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching her, as if the ship itself had become part of something greater, something incomprehensible. The idea sent a chill down her spine, but it also ignited a spark of curiosity. Who were these beings that had taken the colonists? What was their purpose? The holographic interface behind her flickered to life, displaying fragmented data from the ship's logs. Mira's modified mind processed the influx of information, piecing together a story that stretched across millennia. The Odyssey had been adrift for centuries before it was discovered by the crystalline entities. They had boarded the ship, not as invaders, but as observers, meticulously cataloging everything they found. Her mind returned to the cryopods, thousands of colonists, taken and transported somewhere unknown. Yet, there had been no deaths, no harm. It was as if they had been harvested for preservation, not destruction. But why? And why was she left behind? Mira's thoughts were interrupted by Aegis's voice, crackling through the damaged speakers. Incoming communication. Source unknown. She spun toward the console, her heart racing. The holographic display shifted, revealing a complex fractal pattern of light and energy. It wasn't a traditional message, it was a code, one that her neural enhancements began decoding automatically. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. The crystalline entities weren't just passive observers, they were trying to communicate. The decoded message unfolded in her mind, not as words but as concepts and images. Mira saw glimpses of humanity's transformation, how Earth had faced extinction, how the decision to evolve had been made. She felt their struggle, their loss, and their triumph. These beings were her descendants, their existence now so far removed from her own that direct communication was impossible. The message continued, revealing their purpose. The colonists had been taken as part of an experiment, a way to preserve humanity's physical origins while ensuring the continuity of its evolved form. But Mira's role was different. She wasn't just a historian or a survivor, she was meant to be a bridge, a living connection between the past and the future. As the message faded, Mira sat in silence, her thoughts swirling. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't vanished, it had become something extraordinary. Yet, despite their evolution, her descendants still valued their origins. They had left her behind to ensure that the story of humanity's beginnings wasn't lost. She turned back to the viewport, her resolve hardening. The crystals pulsed in a steady rhythm, as if urging her forward. If her descendants believed she was the key to understanding their past, she wouldn't let them down. She would uncover the truth, no matter how impossible the task seemed. Mira stood and began preparing for the journey ahead. The Odyssey might have been broken, but its systems still held secrets. Somewhere within the ship lay the answers she needed to complete her mission. And somewhere beyond the stars, her descendants were waiting. She wasn't ready to give up, not on herself, not on the colonists, and not on the legacy of humanity. Mira worked tirelessly, navigating the fractured remains of the Odyssey. The ship was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and darkened chambers, each step a reminder of the catastrophic failure that had left it adrift for millennia. Yet, amidst the chaos, she found glimmers of hope. Systems that should have failed long ago still flickered with faint signs of life. The ship, despite its wounds, wasn't entirely dead. She reached the engineering bay, where the alien crystals had infiltrated the walls and machinery. The structures shimmered faintly, their glow casting eerie patterns across the room. They weren't random, Mira could feel their purpose, though it eluded her grasp. It was as if the crystals were alive, communicating in ways her unmodified mind would never have understood. Activating the nearest console, Mira accessed the ship's deeper systems. The neural modifications her descendants had made allowed her to interface with the ship in ways that felt almost intuitive. She wasn't just pressing buttons, she was connecting, her thoughts merging with the damaged systems to coax them into revealing their secrets. The logs showed something new. 12,000 years ago, after the colonists were removed, the crystalline entities had spent decades reconfiguring the ship. They had integrated their technology into the Odyssey, transforming it into a hybrid vessel, a bridge between two civilizations. The modifications were subtle yet profound, a delicate merging of human engineering and something far beyond her understanding. As she delved deeper, Mira discovered fragments of a database encoded within the crystals. This wasn't just a ship, it was an observation post, a way for her descendants to study their origins from a safe distance. The modifications to her neural architecture were part of this design, enabling her to interpret the data and serve as a liaison between humanity's past and its future. A sudden vibration beneath her feet startled her, and she froze, listening. The hum of the crystals grew louder, resonating through the walls like a heartbeat. Aegis's voice crackled through the intercom. Energy fluctuations detected. Source, external. Mira ran to the observation window, her heart pounding. Beyond the ship, space itself seemed to shimmer and distort. The crystalline structures pulsed in response, their glow intensifying. Something was approaching, something vast and incomprehensible. The ship's AI provided a monotone update. Incoming entities detected. Classification, post-human descendants. Mira's breath caught. Her descendants were returning. She stood frozen as the space outside the Odyssey folded in on itself, revealing forms of light and energy. They weren't solid beings but manifestations of thought and intention, shimmering with a beauty that defied comprehension. Mira felt the neural enhancements in her mind activate, allowing her to perceive them more clearly. The entities moved with purpose, their presence both awe-inspiring and unsettling. They surrounded the ship, their forms flickering in and out of view. Mira could sense their curiosity, their need to connect. And then, without warning, she felt it, a presence in her mind. It wasn't invasive or hostile. It was gentle, like a hand reaching out in the darkness. The crystalline structures around her pulsed in harmony, creating a bridge between her consciousness and theirs. Images and concepts flooded her thoughts, too complex to fully grasp but clear enough to understand their intent. They weren't here to harm her. They had come to communicate, to share the story of their transformation and to learn from her in return. Mira's fear melted away, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. She was no longer alone in the void. Humanity's legacy wasn't lost, it had simply changed, evolved into something she could barely fathom. As the entities continued their silent dance around the ship, Mira prepared herself for what came next. She wasn't just a survivor of the Odyssey. She was its ambassador, a bridge between two eras of humanity. And now, the dialogue would begin. Mira stood before the observation window, her hands trembling as she watched the luminous forms of her descendants. They surrounded the Odyssey, their movements fluid and purposeful. They weren't simply floating in space, they were interacting with the ship, their light merging with the crystalline structures that had grown around it. It was both mesmerizing and overwhelming. Her neural enhancements pulsed gently, syncing with the energy they emitted. She could feel their intentions brushing against her mind, like whispers on the edge of understanding. They weren't speaking in words but in concepts, emotions, and memories. It was a form of communication unlike anything she had ever experienced. Aegis's voice interrupted the silence, crackling through the speakers. Connection established. Neural bridge active. Awaiting user input. Mira hesitated, her breath catching. The neural bridge was the key, a link that would allow her to communicate directly with the entities. But it wasn't without risk. The modifications to her brain had been designed for this, yet she had no way of knowing what the connection might entail. Would it overwhelm her? Would she lose herself in their vast consciousness? She steadied herself, her fingers brushing the console as she activated the bridge. A wave of energy surged through her mind, not painful but deeply unsettling. For a moment, her thoughts blurred, and she felt as if she were dissolving into the void. But then, clarity returned, sharper than before. The presence of the entities filled her consciousness, vast and complex. They didn't intrude, they waited, offering her the space to adjust. Mira focused, and slowly, the torrent of information began to organize itself into something she could comprehend. They showed her fragments of their existence, how they had transcended their physical forms, becoming beings of energy and thought. They had evolved to survive the cosmic threat that had rendered biological life unsustainable. But their transformation had come at a cost. While they had gained unimaginable abilities, they had lost the simplicity of what it meant to be human. Mira felt their yearning, a deep desire to reconnect with their origins. They valued her, not just as a link to the past but as a reminder of what they had once been. Her memories, her experiences, her very humanity, they were treasures to them, pieces of a puzzle they could no longer solve on their own. In return, they shared their story. Mira saw Earth as it had been, thriving and beautiful, before the cosmic phenomenon arrived. The event wasn't a singular catastrophe but a gradual, inevitable collapse of biological viability. Faced with extinction, humanity had turned to technology, merging their minds with machines, their essence with energy. The process had been long and painful. There were failures, sacrifices, and moments of despair. But through it all, humanity had persevered, adapting and evolving into something extraordinary. The entities around the Odyssey were the culmination of that journey, a new form of existence that spanned the stars. As the connection deepened, Mira began to understand her role. She wasn't just a survivor or a historian, she was a bridge. Her memories, her perspective, and her humanity were invaluable to her descendants. They needed her to help them remember, to guide them as they navigated the complexities of their existence. The entity's presence began to recede, their energy withdrawing from her mind. Mira opened her eyes, blinking as the room came back into focus. She felt drained yet exhilarated, her thoughts buzzing with the enormity of what she had just experienced. The crystalline structures pulsed gently, their light soft and welcoming. Mira placed a hand against the cold surface, a silent acknowledgement of the bond she now shared with her descendants. They were watching, waiting for her to take the next step. She turned back to the console, determination hardening in her chest. There was still so much to uncover, so many questions to answer. The Odyssey wasn't just a wreck, it was a beacon, a connection between humanity's past and its unimaginable future. Mira wasn't ready to give up. She had a mission, and she would see it through. Humanity's story wasn't over, not yet. And she would make sure it was told. Mira sat in the dimly lit command center of the Odyssey, the faint hum of the crystalline structures her only companion. The neural bridge connection with her descendants had left her drained but resolute. She understood now why she had been left behind and why she had been modified. She wasn't just a bridge, she was a storyteller, a historian tasked with preserving the essence of humanity's origins in a form that her descendants could grasp. She accessed the console, searching for more information about the Odyssey's transformation. The logs, though fragmented, painted a clear picture. After the colonists had been removed, the crystalline entities spent decades reconfiguring the ship. It wasn't just a vessel anymore, it was a monument, a living archive designed to endure the passage of time. The structures growing through its hull weren't invasive, they were protective, ensuring the Odyssey could survive in the harsh void of space indefinitely. As Mira delved deeper into the ship's systems, she found another revelation. Embedded within the crystals was a library of sorts, a repository of data left by her descendants. It wasn't just about their history, it included detailed records of the colonists they had taken. Every name, every life, preserved in ways that defied her comprehension. The colonists weren't lost, they were part of something larger, a collective existence she couldn't fully fathom. The data, however, wasn't complete. There were gaps, places where fragments of memory and information had eroded over time. Mira's role, it seemed, was to fill those gaps. Her descendants needed her humanity, her perspective, her intuition, and her capacity for emotion, to help piece together what had been lost. The console beeped, pulling her attention back to the present. Aegis's voice crackled to life. External activity detected. Entities are initiating interaction with core systems. Mira turned to the viewport. Outside, the luminous forms of her descendants were converging on the ship. Their movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as they extended tendrils of light toward the Odyssey. The crystals responded, their pulsing rhythm synchronizing with the entity's energy. It was as if they were preparing for something, a moment of connection far deeper than anything Mira had yet experienced. She braced herself as the neural bridge activated once more. This time, the connection was stronger, more vivid. Concepts and emotions flooded her mind, overwhelming in their intensity. Her descendants weren't just reaching out, they were inviting her to join them, to become part of their collective consciousness. The offer wasn't without its challenges. Mira would retain her individuality, but she would also share her thoughts and memories with the collective. It was a leap of faith, a decision that would irrevocably change her. But she knew it was the only way forward. Mira hesitated, fear creeping into her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready to leave behind the isolation she had clung to since awakening. Yet, the faces of the colonists flashed in her mind, thousands of people who had placed their trust in this mission. She couldn't let them down. "I accept," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm in her mind. The connection deepened, and Mira felt herself merging with the collective. It wasn't invasive or consuming. It was harmonious, like finding a missing piece of herself. The entities shared their knowledge with her, their existence a blend of light, energy, and thought. Mira, in turn, shared her memories of Earth, of humanity's struggles and triumphs. Her perspective enriched the collective, bridging the gap between the past and the present. Through this union, Mira saw a vision of what lay ahead. Her descendants had not abandoned their origins, they had been searching for a way to honor them. The Odyssey was their anchor, a reminder of the journey that had shaped them. Mira's role was to ensure that connection remained intact, a living link to the humanity they had left behind. As the connection subsided, Mira opened her eyes, her mind clearer than it had ever been. The Odyssey was no longer just a ship. It was a testament to humanity's resilience, creativity, and capacity for transformation. And Mira was its caretaker, its voice. She stood, her resolve unshakable. Her journey was far from over. Together with her descendants, she would preserve the legacy of humanity, ensuring it would endure for eons to come. Mira stood at the heart of the Odyssey, surrounded by the faint glow of the crystalline structures that pulsed like veins of a living organism. The air felt charged, alive with the energy of her descendants hovering just beyond the ship's hull. Their connection to her had deepened, and with it, her understanding of the monumental task ahead. She had become more than a historian. She was the living memory of humanity's origins, the thread that tied the biological to the post-biological. But her work wasn't complete. The fragmented data in the Odyssey's systems, the unanswered questions about the colonists, and the mysteries of Earth's final years all needed resolution. The ship's AI, Aegis, interrupted her thoughts. Neural bridge fully operational. Access to crystalline database granted. Entities request additional input from user Mira Hastings. Mira sat at the console, her hands steady as she activated the neural interface. A wave of information flooded her mind, this time more controlled, refined by her growing connection to the collective. The crystalline database expanded before her, revealing more of the story her descendants had tried to preserve. She saw Earth's final days in vivid detail, the looming cosmic threat that had forced humanity to abandon their biological forms. It wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a relentless force that consumed matter and energy indiscriminately. The only path to survival had been transcendence, a transformation that required unimaginable sacrifice. Entire generations had given up their physical lives to perfect the process, ensuring the survival of future iterations. The colonists of the Odyssey, Mira realized, were part of that effort. Their stasis pods had been taken not as an act of malice but as a necessity. Her descendants had preserved them, their physical forms catalogued and stored in ways that allowed their essence to contribute to the collective. They hadn't been lost, they had become part of the evolution. But Mira also saw something unexpected. Among the records was a blueprint, a design for a new kind of vessel. It combined the crystalline technology of her descendants with the engineering principles of humanity's past. This ship wasn't just a tool, it was a message, a way for her descendants to venture back to the stars and reconnect with the scattered remnants of their ancestors. Mira's role in this endeavor became clear. She wasn't just the bridge between humanity's past and future, she was the catalyst for its next chapter. With her knowledge, her perspective, and her unyielding determination, she would help her descendants complete the vessel and chart a new course for their existence. The crystalline structures around her pulsed in unison, their light growing brighter. Outside the ship, the forms of her descendants coalesced, their energy shimmering in patterns that Mira could now recognize as gratitude and purpose. They weren't just asking for her help. They were offering her a place among them, a partnership that would shape the future. Mira rose from the console, her heart steady with resolve. The Odyssey had been a symbol of humanity's hope, a vessel meant to carry them to new worlds. Now, it was the starting point for something even greater, a journey not just across space but through the boundaries of existence itself. As she prepared for the next step, Mira felt a profound sense of belonging. She wasn't just a survivor of the past, she was a creator of the future. Together with her descendants, she would ensure that humanity's story continued, a tale of resilience, transformation, and the unyielding drive to reach for the stars. The ship's lights dimmed briefly as the crystalline structures synchronized one final time. Mira took a deep breath, gazing out at the forms of her descendants as they awaited her decision. She nodded, her voice steady and clear. "Let's begin."